Hello there, and welcome back to Inside the Vault, episode number 37. I'm your host, Ryan Smith. My guest today here on Inside the Vault, he is the sports director at WNCN CBS 17. You can follow him on Twitter at Chris Clark _. Big fan of his and what he does. Chris Clark, welcome to Inside the Vault. How are you?
Appreciate it. Thank you for letting me inside the vault. Last time I was inside the vault, I had a couple of guards with me. Actually, they escorted me out. So that's another story for another time. And thank goodness before I turned 18. But we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, yeah. Well, this podcast name was it didn't come from just anywhere. So the Panthers and anyway, we'll let the listeners make that connection. For those who may not be familiar with you and your day job as a sports director at the CBS affiliate WNCN, just walk us through your role and kind of what you do as a sports director at a news station and how the Panthers come into play.
Obviously, Panthers are the biggest team in the region as far as popularity and everything. But my job, sports director, I'm the main guy, 5 days a week, in front of the camera for CBS 17. Whenever there's a big event going on, for example, the Hurricanes are playing at home, I'm the guy out there in the field. If NCAA tournament time comes around and NC State basketball makes a run, they're sending me with those guys. We've actually got three of us, three people, me and two others, Todd Gibson and Jordan Kramer. So I handle Duke primarily. She handles UNC, and Gibby handles NC State during the season. So we don't try and overlap and go crazy. So, I'm the guy up there trying to, jump in on Shire all the time. Hey, buddy. Who you recruiting, that kind of stuff. And she's doing the same thing with Hubert and Keats and all, but we do overlap. But my job is to anchor the 6 and the 11, actually the 5:30, the 6, the 7, and the 11. We've added some shows, as well as set the schedule for Jordan and to tell Gibby and Jordan exactly where to go, what we can cover, set the schedule up for things if it comes down to it. And we've got 4 games to cover and they all start at 1 o'clock. I'm the bad guy that's got to make that decision on who doesn't get covered. So I'm the guy
Yeah.
that takes all the heat for those kind of things. But it's also in my purview to have us go out to places like Shaw and St. Aug, as well as Fayetteville State, Campbell, and NC
Yep.
Central. Make sure that we get a lot of those other teams and games in, as well as cover high school and take 3 people and try and make it feel like 6 when we're trying to make coverage events and stuff like that. And that's part of it. And when one of them gets sick, I got to go into cover for them. I'll anchor. Or when somebody isn't feeling well or somebody's got a life event, I'm the guy that comes in and fills in. So it basically all falls on these 2 shoulders for anything and everything that goes on for CBS 17. I can't make us any bigger. I can't get any more help from my managers, but I'm also the guy that goes in and goes, hey, if, for example, if we're not live over at game 4 for the Hurricanes, who's it going to look bad? On me? No, you guys. So I need some help to get some people out there. So it's that's pretty much my job, making sure that we're organized in the sports department, making sure that we do creative things, making sure that we cover stories, and making sure that we dig up those angles on stories that people might not always think of, and have some fun doing it, and make some people remember us, inform and entertain, if you will, is what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
And as far as
Um,
far as the Panthers, though, again, that's the biggest team in the region. I mean, don't get me wrong. Hey, Duke, NC State, UNC, love them. Panthers, they're the NFL. They're the biggest, baddest bully on the block. So even though we are 2.5 hours away, we definitely have to keep an eye on what's going on in Charlotte. And I was down there for 4 years working at WCNC as well. So I was there for the Cam Newton era and the Super Bowl run. I just know how fun it can be when that team's rolling, and how god awful terrible it can be when they start losing games and don't post double digit. They're posting double digit losses. So I'm on both sides of it there on that regard.
Exactly. You just talked about it before we set record about just how much as a fan you want to see this team succeed. And you talked about the different angles and storylines that you try to cover as a news station and the sports direct department specifically. So, talk to me about your Panther offseason takeaways. In your opinion, what were some of the storylines that you took away? Obviously, the Panthers just had their 2-day rookie camp at the end of last week, kind of brought in all the rookies, undrafted free agents, those kind of guys. But your overall takeaways, storylines from the Panthers offseason and post draft.
First of all, I was just waiting for the dust to settle on how many more changes that Tepper was going to make. I'll just go ahead and say it right now for anybody listening. I don't like him. I mean, I don't like the way he does things. I know we go to the same barber. I mean, I get that, but that's about the only similarity, man. I
Yeah.
love it, buddy. I'm liking it. He reminds me a lot of a guy that I used to work for in Washington, D.C. when I got out of college. And I'm not talking about John Cook Jr. either. That was the first guy I worked for with that Washington team. But the guy that I worked for right after that for just one season. And it only took one season for me to look at this little midget and go, yeah, I need to get away from this place and get into journalism full time.
Most of our listeners can know who you're talking about there.
Yeah, I'm not going to say the name. But anyway. But we're talking about a guy that's got a $2 billion fantasy league team, and it's called the Carolina Panthers. I mean, I'm not saying that there's just so many. I'm just gonna light him up and take the heat. Send all the emails my way. You're talking about a guy that allegedly comes in with that steady hand. That guy that's going to take it and mold it. And his example is the Steelers. I mean, I could count on one hand how many head coaches the Steelers have had. I mean, right. You've had that many in like what's your tenure there. So how smooth and steady are you there, bud? Seriously, come on now. I mean, that just I mean, knee-jerk reaction. I mean, for crying out loud, you stopped off and gave a restaurant a hard time because put up a sign about what dude, you seriously need to get another hobby or something. Buy a golf course,
He
whatever
had
it
he
takes,
was in the
man.
finance sector, Chris, for a long time.
I mean, yeah, but even that takes patience and long term in it. I'm beginning to seriously wonder about your credentials here, Mr. Tepper. Seriously, I mean, you need to take a longer term view approach of this. I mean, when the first guy you bought, I'm not going to mention his name, and brought him in here because that was just an unmitigated disaster when you brought that college coach in, was just showing me that you were trying to take a different tack. But when you brought in Frank Reich and you started bringing in people that had football knowledge, you had long-term football skills, and you had people that had been around the game. It actually made me go, okay, well, maybe he's listening to somebody now. Maybe, just maybe, somebody's got in his ear and is like, hey, look, let's bring these people in. Let's take a long-term approach and grow this thing. You're not going to be able to turn around a squad on a dime in a night and make sure. And then what? 5, 6 games in, you're already starting to look in and pull the plug on them, and now Frank Reich's gone and everybody else. What are we doing here, man? Seriously, come on. That just let me know that this guy doesn't have the temperament, I don't think, to be an NFL owner unless somebody gets in his ear and goes, hey, let's get you another hobby. How about origami? Anything. Just get away from the Panthers. We're not even going to get into that whole fiasco in Rock Hill either, because that's a whole other thing we're not going to talk about either. But
I
I
hear
was
you.
just waiting for the dust to settle and waiting for things to shake out to see exactly what we had before I started making any kind of, thoughts one way or the other on this. And it looks like he's basically retooled as best he can with, second chance guys. And I mean, I'm just looking around like, what are we doing here, fellas? I mean, seriously, I know the complaint about Rivera and Mr. Richardson was always next year. They never made the big splash. They could never quite get over the hump or whatever it was. And I told people, you're bitching about 7 and 8 wins a year. It can go down to 2 or 3 or none very, very fast. And guess what happened? But we'll get into that later on if you really want to. But my take, chaos off season. And I'm curious to see how all these pieces and you got some decent parts. You got some big name guys I covered in high school. I mean, hey, one of them came back home. I'm really, really looking forward to seeing him play. But I'm just waiting to see how all these pieces fit together with all of these guys that are, I mean, highly recommended, because there was a bunch of highly recommended guys you had coming in last time this year too, and you tanked them. So
Yeah.
that's what I'm basically, this is it right here. That's what I'm waiting on. Come on, show me something. That's basically my summation of the offseason for the Panthers right now, if that's what you want to know.
Yeah. Did you have a draft pick that stuck out to you that was a good pick by the Panthers, or a free agent, or a trade? With Deontay Johnson trade from the Steelers. Speaking of the Steelers, anything that stuck out to you there in the free agent market or in the draft?
Davion was the guy. I mean, I'm just a homer. I'm just going to go ahead and say it right now. I mean, I've watched him come up big. I've watched him come through. I've watched him decimate people. I was hoping he'd have a bigger, better, bad, I don't want to, bad A, type of career, but to have him back, that really was what I was happy to see. And not for nothing. We're talking about some help that they definitely needed. The big signing and else was Robert Hunt.
Yep.
Um, That was the one right there that I was sitting there watching every game, just watching him come through. I watched Ike Ekwonu play up here at NC State. Great guy, but he's one guy. I mean,
I still think he's a solid left tackle. I admit year two, he progressed a bit, but
yeah.
I think he can be a solid left tackle in the NFL. I still truly believe that, and that's not because I have a podcast or that I'm a fan. I watch film, and I believe that. I think guys like Robert Hunt, Damian Lewis are going to help Icky, and I think honestly he just needs to learn. And he learned kind of baptism by fire his second year. And then, heck, his rookie year, outside of Myles Garrett, in the first as his first game as a pro, he played pretty well. So I'm a
I
believer.
think the same thing. I was going right there with you on that one. I'm not sure about all the money they paid Hunt, but hey, you know what? They need help up front, and they've got to get
That's
that
called
help.
the 2 and 15 tax, Chris.
I was going to say, hey, nobody wants to come. It's not like somebody's picking up the phone going, hey, come on down here. We're winning games. You're not getting that benefit of the doubt like Belichick and the Patriots got with those rentals that
Exactly.
they got for 1 year. But you're right. I watched Dickey play up here at NC State. Obviously, college is different than the pros, but I think you're right. Regressed a little bit in the second season there coming back, but with some good pieces around him and some guys that he can learn from. I think he's going to be an incredible pro. But Hunt coming in there lets me know that they're serious about keeping, Bryce upright, which I don't care who you are. If you're on your back 6 seconds, I mean, you're done. I mean, you're running for your life. You can't make
Right.
any plays. It doesn't matter how fast you can read a defense. The faster you can get rid of it, the better you are. But him coming in let me know that okay, they've got a great grasp of the painfully obvious. That's what it told me. They need some help up front. And when you establish what they did up there, you're going to give Bryce a chance. And then after that, you're getting into some of the draft picks. And right off the top, they let you know with the big wide receiver pick out of South Carolina that they had come through there. And Xavier, I mean, that lets me know that they got to get, pieces and parts to basically have weapons to throw to. Now, I don't know why they didn't. God, I don't want to go back to before. I want to try to keep this positive and focused because the guy that they sent to Chicago is the one that. Sorry.
DJ
Anyway,
Moore.
yeah. I'm trying not to backtrack here, but he should be here still. I'm sorry, but with Leggett coming in, I know the knock on him has been his route running, and I know a lot of people have said he's not quite there, but he did everything he was asked in college. In the last 2 days of camp, when they've asked him to pick up and do more, when they've asked him to change, he's been doing it, and not just doing it, but doing it at a high level as well.
Yep.
That's I've seen the video, been down there. So I know that he's capable and I know that he can do this. So you've got another weapon out there in him and a couple other picked up. I know that the running backs they got, I mean, they got I think they got enough to outfit a whole, 11-man squad with just running backs, actually, with all the people that they've signed to come in and work out. So, but
Yeah.
with the
Yeah.
wide receiver crew, I like the kid out of South Carolina. I think he's going to be a great pickup for him. And I think that he's going to be a go-to. Going to be a rookie, obviously. He's going to have some, going to be that learning curve. Looks like this, but I think he can handle it. I think he's got the physical skills, and I think that he can pick up that playbook, and I think that he can pick up what they're putting down faster than some of the guys in the past. And if any one of those running backs back there can handle, 15, 16, I mean, any one of those guys steps up, they're going to be just fine. Because, man, if that was the one thing I didn't notice, I was like, what is that group over there? I thought it was like linebackers and tight ends. And, whoa, that's the whole running back core. Oh, my goodness. So somebody's coming out of there that's going to get a great job. And whoever comes out of there is going to be battle tested. I do know that much.
Yeah. Jonathan Brooks, running back from Texas, their second round pick, who I thought was a really good get, coming off a torn ACL, but he should be ready for camp. He does remind me not of Christian McCaffrey specifically, but I think he can do some of those same things that McCaffrey can do when he was with Carolina. Also, another pick that, personally, I was sad to see go at the time, but we won't backtrack that far back in the past. And then, like you said, Rashad Penny, former Seahawks first round pick, who was there when David Canales was there, and Chuba Hubbard, Miles Sanders, as you mentioned. The draft pick I'm really excited about personally is Jadavian Sanders, the tight end from Texas. Two Texas guys. I think Greg Olson can finally his replacement can finally, I think, come on down here in Mint Street. I think Sanders is going to be a good get for the Panthers, but he is a rookie like these other guys, and we'll just have to see how that plays out.
Have been a
Dan
large
Morgan,
hole
David.
there ever since he left. You're right. With Greg Olson gone, that was a safety valve that Cam went to all the time. And before him, Shockey was there as well, which was
Yep.
that I mean, a big tight end to throw to when you get down and out, that goes a long way. So I do think you are right about the guys from Texas too coming in. You know what? Not for nothing. It's always nice to have somebody that looks a little familiar that you can have talk with to pick up some clues on here. But I think you're right. That tight end is going to be a huge help for Bryce and something that really wasn't. I'm not going to bash the guy before, but it wasn't quite always there like it should have been. I think they're developing those weapons now to give him more room to create, if you will, because he didn't really have a whole lot of that last year.
Yeah. Dave Canales and Dan Morgan is the new regime in Carolina, obviously this year. Dan Morgan, former player for the Panthers at linebacker, obviously a star-studded linebacker back in his day. And then Dave Canales coming over from Tampa Bay, former Panther quarterback Baker Mayfield down there in Tampa Bay. And obviously Dave Canales in Seattle, which we mentioned earlier as well. So what are your thoughts on this new regime, specifically, obviously, Dan and the GM seat and Dave, obviously, as the head coach? I like the staff they brought in specifically. Going back to your Tepper comment, after the introductory press conference, I mean, Joe Person from The Athletic, who has been on this podcast as well, he asked Dave, he's like, you care to comment? And he said, I'm in the background now. That was his quote. And we'll see kind of what happens there. Your face tells it all. So, what do you think of this new regime in Carolina with Canales and Dan Morgan, and how much of a leash do you think they're going to have?
I think that leash is going to be about that long, is what it was. I think Joe, love him to death. I read him all the time. He's one of the reasons that I can, keep up to speed as well as I do. Because definitely, if anybody's got, the extra coin to spend, he is definitely the guy that you want to follow to
Yeah,
get those inside. But they got a leash that's about that long. I mean, that's about it. He's already shown it. I mean, this guy can't drive down the street and see a sign that says "Let man pick the" without stopping. So I feel very bad for Dan, and I know why he sits there like this sometimes, because I watch him and I think, man, all he needs is a cigarette and a blindfold, because I'm pretty sure Tepper's tearing him up later. But I think Morgan has got the temperament to be able to deal with the ownership and take the heat, because I know he's taken it with some of the things he's done,
yeah,
because he sees the value that's coming. And of course, when these things do pay off, it always turns into, the owner going, "Oh, I had full faith and confidence." When no, that wasn't the case at all. So I think he's got the right temperament for it. And of course, him having worked with Canales as well, and being behind the scenes, I mean, a lot of people just thought of Dan as a solid football player, but he's no dummy. I mean, no, he's been around. He can grade talent, and he's been around the game, and he's been around people that were smarter than him, and he's learned a lot from those guys about how to grade talent. And I think he's done a good job of putting pieces together to make this team competitive. Which, if you're competitive, that's all the people in Bank of America, when they show up on Sunday, want to see. They want to see a competitive game. They don't want to see one that's a blowout by halftime, and then you're out there on Mint Street partying, trying to get out and beat the traffic. So I think he's done a good job of laying the foundation and putting the pieces together, which he's doing it again because they blew up the team again. But this time he's got a coach, that a younger guy, and say what you will, I like Frank. He was not so much a Buffalo Bill, but I'm a Maryland guy, so we go way back. So
yep.
I love to see him succeed, and I think he would have been successful had he been given the time. I think Canales has got more. I don't want to say salesmanship or show. He's putting more show on the show. I think Frank was more of an administrator, and didn't bother to deal with the Twitter or Instagram or whatever, anything like that. And people that he just did his job behind closed doors, let the results speak for himself. Dave's a little more in front, a little bit more showy with it. And I think he's got a better handle on young quarterbacks, just from the way that he's been able to handle guys like Mayfield, Geno last year on Seattle. I mean, resurgence. I mean, and before that, I think he's got a better handle on those kind of things. And it's copycat league, I know that, but I think this guy's bringing something new, and I think that this guy's bringing a fresh take on it as well. And I think that he's got a better handle on how to deal with guys like me who are coming in like this, and can make a loss seem not so bad, if you will. But I like his approach. I like his mentality. I like talking to him. I like the answers that he gives. I like the way that he's coming through with things, and I like the focus on the ground up. I like the focus on the fundamentals, and I like the focus on what he's doing with Bryce, because I mean, he's got the talent, and when he had more than 5 seconds to show it, he showed it. I mean, and it wasn't, a question of whether or not he can do this. I know people talk about he's a small guy, like hell with all that. No, he can run an offense in the NFL. He can score points in this NFL, and he can win games in the NFL. But he just number one didn't have the time, and he didn't have the weapons. Well, now he's looking like he's got the time from the offensive line he's got up, and he's got a guy on his side, offensive-minded coach that can draw up the plays, that can get them up and down the field and cater things, I think, to more what he's good at. Whereas I don't think Frank Reich and those guys were really doing that. I think that they had a plan. They wanted to see it run this way. We're going to fit you into this. I think Coach Canales has got a little better handle on what Bryce does well, or he's finding out now, especially. And he's going to cater that offense to what Bryce does well. So I think it's not going to be, you're talking about a hot take here. As much as I'm looking at Tepper like, God, I don't want to see this guy win. I think that they're actually one of the last teams to make it into the postseason next year. Just the way things have turned over and the guys that you've got. And you've got a lot of guys in there now that weren't there last year. And they're looking around. Some of them like, this might be my only shot. They're definitely going out with a bang. So I think you got enough pieces to be the last playoff team in the NFC is what I'm saying.
That is a bold take. We'll get another bold prediction in a few minutes as we get you out of here. Last few for you. Bryce Young in year two, you kind of just talked about it, what success looks like for him, doing the things that he does well, and kind of making things a little bit easier for him, giving them protection, obviously surrounding him with the weapons. But what does that specifically look like for Bryce in year two to define success? Is that leading the Panthers to that last second playoff spot, as you mentioned? Is it 5-6 wins, which is double, triple what we had last year? Obviously can't go all but up. Or is it somewhere kind of in between? What does success look like?
Still room to go down. I've covered teams that did that, so don't put that out there. So, but I'd have to say that if you're not at least 500 and banging on the door, looking like you're trying to kick it in that last couple of weeks, the way that the way the NFL comes down to the last couple of weeks, and
Yeah.
I think if they don't winning record, 500 winning record, that would be success. And as far as numbers for Bryce, I'm not really looking at numbers for him. What I'm looking at is this guy. If he's got to hand it off 27 times because he gets out there and sees the way they're playing it, he does it and they win, fine. If he's got to throw it 45 times, God, I hope he doesn't have to. But if he's got to throw it 40 plus times to win, that's what I'm looking for. Him doing what it takes to win a ball game. Not turning it over, obviously, not throwing picks, making good decisions no matter what it is. If it's a great stats game and he puts up some Madden-like numbers, great. If he comes back and, throws for 70, but, he rushes for 2 and, it just plays, clock control and game manager, great. That's the kind of stuff I'm looking for Bryce. Not so much the, 400 yards passing, 200 yards rushing, which, by the way, Cam Newton did that a couple of times. So
Yes, he did.
that's not happening anymore. Cam Newton ain't walking through that door. So if he is, he's going to have a hat on and a cigar and he's not playing. So I'm looking for Bryce to basically lead the team and do whatever it takes to win games is what I'm looking for him. That would be what I'm judging him on success. The wins and the losses, not throwing picks, not turning it over, and not having issues late to be able to close games out like he showed us in that one at the end of the season last year.
We talked about storylines earlier and kind of unearthing the hidden gems and the things that people aren't talking about. So, to your perspective, what are we not talking about right now with the Panthers? Whether it's just the offseason, during the season coming up, in 2024, first year of this new era under Canales and Morgan, what are we not talking about when it comes to the Panthers?
Kind of curious to find out who they're going to have in there for that third quarterback spot. I mean, who's going to be starting. And
I did not expect you to say that. Okay, keep going. I'm listening.
You got, but they don't have a third guy in there just yet. I mean, and I know everybody goes, third guy. Those guys have a tendency of showing up. They have a tendency to really, play a big role, especially with the way guys get blasted, if you know what I'm saying here. And the other guy that I'm curious at, maybe it's just because I've seen him the last couple of days here, Jalen Coker. I don't know if you're familiar with him or not.
Yeah, undrafted free agent from Holy Cross. Yeah.
Been doing real good. Maybe it's just the guys that I knew that came out of Holy Cross, but really been turning heads. And if you're turning heads, in the NFL, that means that you're doing something extremely well, especially with all the undrafted free agents that they had come through there. Because you and I both know they bring some guys out just to catch passes and then say, hey, thanks, take care, But this guy is doing more than just catching passes. He's turning heads and he's got coaches talking. So I'm really curious to see exactly how what his ceiling is, to be perfectly straightforward, obviously, because he's doing a great job at minicamp, and he wouldn't be the first guy to come into minicamp, look great, and then never see him again. But I think this guy's got some staying power. And I think you're going to be hearing about that, hear that last name Coker beyond just this camp and into minicamp. And I think he's got a shot at making a difference because, I mean, one thing about having a new head coach and everybody starts at the same 0 point now. So if you stand out and this is your chance. So you got a lot of guys going for broke, and I think he's one of them.
Last two, I know you got to go here in just a few. Where can our listeners go to for all things Panthers coverage? You mentioned yourself and some of your team earlier. What are some social media handles and places that our listeners and people around North Carolina who want to follow you guys and see this team? Where can they go?
Obviously, drop by yours truly, Chris Clark _ on Twitter. You can also catch Jay Kramer on Twitter as well. She's my weekend, not my week, I shouldn't say week. She's the sports anchor that sits next to me and handles everything. Joe Person is another great one to find out. And if you're down in the Charlotte area, WJZY, Fox affiliate down there, they've got great Charlotte Queen City show every single night at 10:30. They really do it up right. They got a great post-game show as well. And I know Christian Audisirk and the crew that puts that on really go above and beyond. It's not just showing highlights. They're talking about, why guys wear the cleats they wear. I was watching one night and they were talking about the different kind of gloves. And I'm like, oh, wow. You guys seriously must be we're tracking the bottom of the barrel. You're talking about gloves, but no, they were talking about catching passes and the different styles and different lengths of cleats. So JZY in Charlotte as well. Joe Person down there does a great job of those kind of things. That's those are the people, if you want to stay up on the Panthers, are the ones that you need to check out in and around.
And you might have already said it. Your hot take was squeezing into the playoffs and the NFC as that seventh seed. But do you have a 2024 bold prediction? I think that might be it. Do you have another one up your sleeve, or is that what you're going to go with? Bold prediction.
I'm going to go ahead and it's either going to be that or David Tepper stroking out when he drives by another one of those restaurants because he can't stand the sign. If I was them, I'd put up something new every single week because he drives by your place. So you got his ear, you got his attention. But no, I get the feeling they've got the right mix of people. You've got enough guys that. And it always happens when you got a brand new kind of coach and, first year guy, and he comes into a new place. It's not like the Panthers didn't have talent, and it's not like they didn't have players. They did. I mean, and their defense, I know everybody talks about, their offense and problems. Their defense showed up. I mean, they were just getting run through because they were out there all the time, but they did an incredible job on that side of the football, holding teams to even give their offense a chance. So you got a defense, and that travels. So, at home, smoking. On the road, they're still doing well. So they've tightened that up. If you give Bryce enough weapons and you give him enough time, you can score some points. You don't need much, especially with the way that they've got their defense set up. I'm telling you, they've got the tools to be that. I mean, it might take the last week, and it might take one of those equations like on that meme where it's just like running through where you need somebody to win and somebody to lose and somebody else to score 20 points or whatever it is. But I got a feeling they're going to be one of the last teams the last week fighting to get in, and they might get some help from some other team to get them in, but last team in the playoffs in the NFC. I just, especially with the way the NFC South is. I mean, I got no idea about them, but last player, they're not going to win the division. I'm not saying that, but the last team in, that's my bold prediction. Go ahead and mark that up, cue it up, and cut it out. So that way, when they come back and they finish up and they win it, we can have this discussion again over dinner or something like that. Or you can bring it out and be like, hey, check this chucklehead out. He thought the Panthers were going to win. Huh? They won one game. So either way, I'm here for it. But I think they're going to be the last ones into the postseason. They got enough talent, they got enough enthusiasm, and they got enough guys on that squad that believe. And I'd rather face a team of all pros than a full squad of believers, because believers don't know when to quit and they don't know when they've been beat. And just watching those guys, I think you got a bunch of believers down there in Charlotte.
Yeah. Well, that's a good place to wrap it up. As I said at the top, my guest today has been Chris Clark, WNCN Sports Director at CBS 17. Chris, all the best to you. Thanks for coming on the podcast today, and we'll talk to you down the road.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. Come back anytime you'll have me there, man. Thanks again.
And that'll wrap up this episode of Inside the Vault, episode number 20 or 37, I should say. Rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. We will see you next time.